let me ask my friend and colleague Star Parker, who's with Urban Cure, to ask you the first question.
Thank you. And thank you, Senator, for gracing the NRB with your presence here in our presidential forum. As you know, the national religious broadcasters come here to Nashville annually to convene so that we can refresh and we can revive so that we can go out and reach the millions as Christian leaders. You mentioned and have mentioned since the passing of your friend, Justice Scalia, the 5-4 challenges that we have faced for a long time regarding the court. But there's one challenge that has not been mentioned that I would like to ask you about, and that is eminent domain.
Yeah.
Anton Scalia stood fast for conservative principles in defending the United States Constitution. Well, Justice Scalia dissented in the 5-4 decision in 2005, Kelo versus the City of New London, where the Supreme Court interpreted the Constitution's eminent domain provision to allow government to confiscate private property and give it to other private owners to promote economic development, in quotes. Justice Scalia equated the Kelo decision to the Dred Scott decision, where the Supreme Court ruled that blacks are not human, but are property and cannot become American citizens. He also equated the decision to the Roe v. Wade decision to legalize abortion on demand. Yet, regarding the Kelo decision, your presidential opponent, Donald Trump, told Fox News' Neil Cavuto, "I happen to agree with the decision 100%. Now, according to the Cato Institute, since the Kelo decision in 2005, over 1 million households have been evicted from their homes by government action. 29% of them minority households, and 32% are households in poverty. Where do you stand on private businesses using government power to take private property?"
Well, Star, thank you for that question, and you and I have been friends for many, many years. Thank you for your incredible ministry, speaking the truth and encouraging and empowering people to lift out of challenging circumstances, to really understand that in America anyone can achieve anything. You have such a powerful voice, and I'm grateful for everything you do. I will also note briefly before answering your question that I may be wearing boots, but Star's boots are much cooler than mine. It's not even close. Look, your question is very, very important. I am categorically opposed to Kelo. Kelo was a disastrous decision. It was wrong. And I think the Kelo decision really taps into two important themes. Number one, fidelity to the Constitution. The Constitution requires that private property can be taken for public use and only with just compensation. And what the Kelo court did is it effectively read the public use provision out of the Fifth Amendment. It says it no longer has to be public use. It can be for private gain. We need justices who actually honor the Constitution, who don't erase parts of it that they disagree with. But it's also, it is a symptom of a broader problem we have in government, of government being used as a tool of giant corporations and the rich and powerful to target the powerless. You know, Justice Sandra Day O'Connor wrote a dissent in Kelo that was powerful, and she said, under this opinion, every Motel 6 can be condemned to build a Ritz-Carlton. Because what happened in Kelo is you had a woman who had her family home for decades that the city of New London, Connecticut wanted to condemn to build a parking lot for a big pharmaceutical company. And the Supreme Court said, no problem there. You can condemn it to build the parking lot. Well, as you know, Donald Trump's record on this is not just abstract and theoretical. In Atlantic City, there was a little old lady named Vera Koking who lived in her family home for many, many years. She loved her home. Donald wanted her home because he wanted to build a parking lot for the limousines in his casino. And so he went to his buddies in Atlantic City and the government and convinced them to try to condemn her home, to bulldoze her home so he could build a parking lot for casinos. Now, she fought it for years. Ultimately, she beat it. So she never had her home bulldozed because she was able to beat Donald Trump's efforts in court. But it's interesting, and it's a great example of how government gets abused. Whenever Donald's asked about this, He says, well, we need eminent domain for roads and for schools. Well, roads and schools are a public use. It's right there. Government does have the power of eminent domain to build a freeway. That is a very different thing from government being used as a tool to help the rich and powerful against those who are more vulnerable. Let me put it in a broadcasting sense. Under that principle, government could take away your radio station and give it to another bigger and wealthier radio station because they conclude, you know what, country music generates more money than Christian broadcasting, so let's just take all the property from the one and give it to the other because, frankly, they gave us more campaign contributions. It's fundamentally wrong. The deals in Washington are the result of a corruption, and it's a corruption of both parties. Both Democrats and Republicans far too often are willing to act for the big money interests in Washington at the expense of the people. I think we need a president who will stand for the property rights, stand for the liberty of the American people against the bipartisan corruption of Washington.
Thank you. I want to move on to Star Parker. I know has another question for you, Senator.
Well, thank you, because another place that working men and women of America are concerned is on the war on poverty and poverty rates, the $22 trillion war, a quarter of the budget now every year, $900 billion. While research and data overwhelmingly shows the correlation between single-parent homes and poverty. According to Ron Hackens of the Brookings Institution, in 2009, the poverty rate for children in homes with married parents was 11%. But the poverty rate for children in homes headed by a single mother in that same year were 44.3%. Yet giving birth outside of marriage is becoming increasingly a part of the American culture. In 1970, only 7% of American children lived in a home with a mother who had never married. Today, 48% of American children live in a home where a mother has not been married. So my question is based on a Gallup poll from last year that showed 61% of Americans say giving birth outside of marriage is morally acceptable. Do you think that it is a problem that more and more Americans, particularly young Americans, think having a child outside of marriage is morally acceptable? And if you think it's a problem, what would you do as president to restore traditional marriage and return fathers to homes?
Star, it's an incredibly important question, and all of us know the deterioration of the family in recent decades has been one of the most heartbreaking developments in our society. Listen, the challenges facing single moms, for me, is something very personal. I come from a family with a lot of single moms. Both of my aunts were single moms. My sister was a single mom, and for a period of time, my mother was a single mom. When I was a little boy and my father left us before he became a Christian, thankfully he was saved and came back and reunited our family. There is no harder challenge anyone faces than being a single mom. And our prayers need to lift up single parents that are raising kids. Raising kids is hard enough with two parents. But with one alone having to work, it is unbelievably difficult. And our prayers need to lift them up. But the best cure for poverty is a secure two-parent home with a mother and father caring for those children. Now, many of these issues are not going to be cured by government. And any presidential candidate who says, I'm going to magically wave a wand and fix this, is not being honest with you. Many of these are issues for the church, are issues for the community, to work to encourage and build strong marriages as really the foundation of the family, of the community, of where we live. But I do think government policies can be changed so that they're not attacking marriage, so they're not undermining marriage. And there is also a powerful bully pulpit of the presidency to speak out of the virtues of fathers. Take responsibility and care for your children.
I'd like to follow up with that with regard to the role of government, because the American people are being forced to send $900 billion to Washington, where less than 20 cents on a dollar actually reaches the home where we say we're trying to help. So President Bush attempted a faith-based initiative, which wasn't perhaps in some people's estimation the right approach to welfare reform part 2. Paul Ryan is proposing to allow for more the federal government to get out of this business and allow for the states to take up a little bit more flexibility to try to help the problem closer to the community. Where would you find yourself in those two different ways of approaching this particular dilemma from a public policy standpoint?
On virtually every issue, I'm a supporter of sending as much as possible back to the states and back to the local government, having accountability from the people. And I think when it comes to welfare reform, we need to have creativity, we need to have innovation. I think faith-based approaches make enormous differences, because if you're going to change someone's heart and mind, you know, when I was in college, I wrote one of my 2 junior papers comparing government welfare to charitable and church efforts at caring for people. And the church that I attended growing up was a church that had a very big food pantry and ministry with the homeless and the poor in Houston. So I spent a lot of time interviewing our pastor, interviewing a lot of the people that worked in the food pantry. And one of the things that was striking is the incentives are all very, very different. You know, if you're raising money in a church or a charity to provide for people in need, you're not interested in wasting that money. If you see a young, healthy man come in and say, I need help, I'm down on my luck, you'll give him some groceries, you'll help them. But if that same young man comes in the next week and the next week and the next week and begins treating it just like the grocery store, okay, I need my groceries this week, there comes a point where you say, listen, son, this is not, we're not going to feed you the rest of your life. Now, what are the problems you're facing? Do you have a job? No? Well, why not? Can we help you get a job? Do you have skills? Well, let's work with you on training. Do you have drug and alcohol problems? So many of the people facing these challenges are wrestling with drug and alcohol addiction. My sister, who was a single mom, who wrestled with drug and alcohol addiction her whole life and ultimately passed away from an accidental overdose. So these are challenges that people are facing in a church group. And so often the answer is, do you know Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior? That can transform in a way that 1,000 government programs can never touch the spirit. And so I think as much as we can be empowering faith-based operations, the better. As much as we could be sending it to state and local level, the better. And I think the philosophy should be that the social safety net should be a trampoline and not a hammock.
We should pause for the journalist to write that down. That was a great quote.
Well, you know, I think of these issues often from the perspective of my dad. My dad spent much of the last couple of days with you guys. But, you know, when my dad came to America in 1957, he was just 18. He couldn't speak English. And he had nothing. He had $100 that was sewn into his underwear. And he washed dishes making 50 cents an hour. Paid his way through school. And I try to think of every challenge facing this country, every domestic challenge from the perspective of my dad. How would it have impacted my father? If my dad were washing dishes, you look at illegal immigration. If he was making 50 cents an hour, if there were an illegal immigrant willing to come in and wash dishes for 30 cents an hour, my dad might have lost that job right then. He would have been hurt. He was vulnerable. But I've also said many times, thank God that some well-meaning liberal didn't come put his arm around my father. Say, let me take care of you. Let me make you dependent on government. Let me give you a check and let me sap your self-respect and your individual dignity. And by the way, while I'm at it, don't bother learning English. I respect your culture so much, I'm going to lock you out of the professional and educated classes in this country. Would have been the most damaging thing you could have done to my dad. I would have rather you took a 2x4 and broke his legs. That would heal faster than the damage to the human spirit. Right. We need to be focusing every public policy decision. It's why welfare reform and a work requirement. The object of welfare should be to get every able-bodied adult off of welfare and with the dignity of a job providing for their kids.